Hello gamers, Power Heal here, and today we're going to talk about AQ40 boss strats. This video is going to be for Priest specifically. We'll do one for all the classes. Not going to cover too much of the trash in here, only because it's going to be easier for me to cover trash in like an actual, VOD review type style, right? So we're going to not really touch that right now. Just going to cover the bosses, and I would kind of just do a VOD review of that, and I may do that in the future, but the footage I have is like so scuffed because I was in the pretty demon run, as we call it, on my Priest. We got it done, but it was quite messy, so I'd rather it be a little bit cleaner so you can see how things are supposed to be done. So yeah, we'll just kind of get into talking about the bosses, but before we do that, I just want to mention one of the trash things you want to look out for is Priest. Are the the guys that are on like four legs. I forget exactly what you call them, but they look like sphinxes kind of, except without like the little crown. I believe they're kind of like black or kind of like a dark bluish color. And you basically just have to mana drain them until they hit full mana. If they hit full mana, they explode. I'm pretty sure it's kind of like the AQ20 boss. It looks very similar to that. You'll notice them in AQ40. So yeah, when you encounter those, you want to mana burn them. That's kind of like the main thing. And then there's also, I believe, Anubisath destroyers. They kind of look like the mobs from AQ20 that you pull in the last section with a Saurion, where you have to kind of either run away from them, and they have different mechanics. These are like a more sophisticated version of those. And we can make a whole video on how to heal those, or I'll cover them in more detail perhaps during a VOD review style video. But basically the thing you really want to watch out for them with is Plague, and it puts this debuff on a raid member, and it just keeps doing damage to them and everybody around them. So they have to move out of the raid, and you have to continue to heal them for quite a while, usually after even the boss dies. So just wanted to kind of put those things out there, and yeah, we'll just hop into the normal bosses now. So the first boss is, he's got like a platform here, right? We'll just do it like, there's some stairs, okay, like this. Then there's kind of like a main platform, okay? And then there's like sub-platforms here. And then there's like there's stairwells here that go up into like an overhang in the back. Okay. Now, so you basically walk in, and there's like 3 boss positions. Okay, I'm gonna try and just make it a different color here. I think I'm actually gonna draw the lines in black next time. Actually, we'll just redo everything. Why not? We'll just redo everything in black. Might as well do it correctly, right? Okay, so here's the stairs going up. Right, then here's the center platform, kind of, right? Then bigger platforms, these are connected with stairs, okay? So I'll put a stairwell here, and then there's a stairwell here, and a stairwell here. These are the stairs that connect, like a big overhanging platform in the back is basically kind of how this looks. And the boss will start basically on the center platform here, okay, and then he will split, and typically you're trying to tank one like on this platform, one on this platform, and one in the center. And the reason why you want to split them up is because they do an arcane explosion, which can do quite a bit of damage if all of them are stacked up and they're all exploding at the same time. Now I believe you can kick it. If you're in a pug though, and you're in a guild where the player quality isn't that great, don't expect kicks though, right? So you kind of want to be in a position where you're not getting hit by all 3 of these simultaneously. Usually that can be on any of the platforms, right? But sometimes the bosses will wander over, or if you're in a guild that's really sophisticated, you may arcane protection potion and try and cleave the ads down with the main boss, right? So there's a bunch of different kind of ways you can do this boss. But basically what you want to be doing as a healer is you want to kind of look and see where the most amount of people that need to be healed are. Okay, so for example, like yesterday when I did this on the priest, it started out fairly normally, okay, where, killing the guy in the center, and then they split. We didn't stack them really, but then this boss kind of wandered over to this one, and it was like a clone in the actual boss, and the other clone was dead. So I kind of had to readjust my strategy on the fly, and typically what I like to do is I run up the stairs, and I kind of come, you can go either side, but I go left side typically, and I'm just getting some heals out and stuff like that, making sure people don't die. Because if somebody does pull threat, the boss, you kind of enter the point of the game now where even the bosses that aren't known to be like melee bosses do kind of hit somewhat hard if they're hitting a target that isn't the tank. And then they can also Arcane Explosion on top of that, right? So you do want to make sure that you're, keeping people up as you're getting into position. You're not just letting people die for free. So you're healing them. You walk up to the left side, right? And you can kind of stay here if you want. It's not a bad position. You can be like kind of in between and heal kind of both platforms from here, right? Because you have LOS down here, and then you have LOS here. And you basically just stay in a position where you're only getting hit by one Arcane Explosion. The ranges aren't super huge, so it's kind of easy if I just draw like a mock range around these, right? It's not taking up the whole platform typically, right? So you can stand like anywhere over here is normally what people do, and they'll heal two bosses. Now, sometimes what I'll do, and when I did this raid, is I'll walk up the stairs, and you can jump from the stairs on a diagonal, and you're on the little balcony here. Now, I don't know if this bugs out the boss, if it targets you. The thing is that the only reason why it would target you is for mind control. Right, I've never had it actually bug out the boss, and I've done it like this a few times, but I could see it maybe being a problem, but I don't think so, because you're still in range of the boss. Like, it's not like you're lining the boss in a way that the boss shouldn't be able to target you, because when you walk down the stairs, you're still, like, in perfectly visible LOS, because the stairs have these, like, banners, right, like, on the, like, almost like little borders, so you would run up the stairs, and then you jump onto like the outline of the border right here, right? Because you think of it as the stairs being flanked by something like this. So you go up the stairs, and then you jump onto this, and you follow it down. And you're basically sitting at the base of the railing, and you just have a bit more height, and you can kind of like hit people. Because like the thing is, if you're over here on this platform, right? Let's say you're over here, you might actually lose LOS down here if you're too far over or something like that. If you're on the banister, you have so much height, you can kind of hit everything. Now, what happened in my run is that the fight ended up kind of going over in this direction, right? The bosses got dragged over here for whatever reason. A lot of times what will happen is somebody will just get aggro on the boss, like a damage dealer, and they're trying to like run away. They don't really know what's going on. So that's typically how the bosses get moved into weird spots. But yeah, if something like that happens, you can just follow the boss, if that makes sense. And you're basically just using flash heals and power word shield. This is one where you can like almost fully send it, because it shouldn't really be that long of a boss fight, even with a guild that's not super experienced or good. So yeah, just full send, try and save people by any means necessary, and that's basically how you kill this boss. Definitely always be watching out for yourself, because if you die, most likely other people are going to die as a result, right? Because there's less healing, especially if you're a competent healer. So it's a protect yourself at all times situation. Make sure you're topped off, because you can just kind of get like the bosses do blink and stuff like that, so they can just kind of blink onto you and kill you with Arcane Explosion, things of that nature. So be cognizant of that, and just try and keep yourself topped off. And yeah, so that's basically how you do the first boss. It's kind of a mess, but you'll kind of, as you do it more times, you'll kind of get used to it. When I do the VOD review of the actual boss, you'll see it better, right? So the next fight is going to be Bug Trio, and this fight is it's just kind of like in a circular room, I guess you could say. There's like little cubbies. A lot of people don't really bother with the cubby strat. I know that in 2019, that was kind of big. So it's like kind of like a circular room, and I think there's like there's spots where there's like features of the room like this, stuff like this, right? So there's like little alcoves and cubbies. Now, how it worked back in the day when people were doing the super boomer strats is you would bring the boss that like fears into the cubby or something like that, right? But mostly what people do now is they just zug the bosses down. I think we actually had basically like 3 of them in the middle or close to it in our run. And I'll just put some markers on here, right? So we'll just put maybe like the 3 bosses somewhere in the middle. And they're just like killing them. Now, the main thing you want to worry about is the fear that one of them does. So you just want to kind of stay away from them. And I believe one of them also charges. So you kind of want to stay away, but you don't want to be like the furthest person out, if that makes sense. And then one of them drops a poison cloud and death. This fight is kind of very easy. The main thing is that there's heavy damage on the tank in some sections of the fight, right? And then, especially if you have a tank that's tanking multiple, but it kind of depends. Like, a lot of times people just, tank them individually. And then one of the bosses does a poison volley. Okay, so it's basically just balancing, making sure the tank is getting healed and, healing up the poison volley. So just always be ready to prayer of healing. And the idea is you want to always be caught up on the tank. This is another fight that is relatively short, so it's kind of easy to just like flash heal the tank and then prayer of healing when the poison volley comes out. The poison volley, how much damage it actually does is kind of a bit dependent on your faction and how aware people are, right? Because if you're playing with a shaman in your group, they can pretty much just drop a totem and instantly cleanse the poison. And I'm not sure if it insta-cleanses the first tick like the Visc poison, but even if it doesn't, it still prevents a lot of the damage, I believe, at least on this fight. So you don't really have to do as much healing if you have people doing stuff like that, right? And then druids can also abolish poison. They can kind of pre-abolish poison, right? Because something like abolish poison can sit on your character, so they can just like put a bunch of those out beforehand, and then they cleanse stuff. So how much you're gonna have to AoE heal is going to be kind of dependent on just how active the poison cleansing is for the volleys, but you'll probably have to AoE heal a little bit. So basically I'm just popping up the tank with flash heals, shields if needed, and then, prayer of healing on my group if they are damaged with the poison volley. One thing is sometimes this room is not huge, but especially if people eat a fear or something like that, they'll end up in like weird spots, right? So your group, let's say you're in like group 7, you might start the fight all around here, right? But then after, if people do get feared, they might end up here, 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 here. And people tend to like, especially if they don't know what they're doing, they tend to not like group back up. So if you're really trying to make the most use out of your prayer of healing, if there's just been a fear that's gone out and you're not concerned about getting feared again, it does help to kind of move towards the center of the room, because other people are probably in all sorts of weird positions, so it kind of gives your prayer of healing a better chance to hit everybody. Taking the talent for this fight to give your prayer of healing more range can also help. And that talent is just more helpful in AQ in general than it would be in other instances. I feel like we're starting to kind of get to that point. And it's not that you really need it necessarily. Like if people were positioned properly, you don't necessarily need that talent. But again, when people don't really know what they're doing on a lot of these fights, they have a tendency to just kind of like meander and wander throughout the battlefield. And if there's anything that displaces them, they tend not to like come back to the position that they were in. Okay, so that's basically the how I would describe this fight. It should be a relatively easy fight. It's mostly just like tank and spank, and there's like very few mechanics. So yeah, just be ready to use prayer healing and make sure you keep your tanks up. That's the long story short here. Select this. Okay. Now we'll do Fankriss next. So Fankriss is like, well, actually, I think next is Sartura, right? So Sartura is basically like it's It's another kind of circular room. Okay. Like this. We'll say you enter, let's say like here. It's probably not this big, right? But the boss is like roaming around with ads in the center. Okay. I don't know how many ads it is. It's like a boss and like mini ads. I think it's like 3 or 4 ads. And the idea is that a bunch of these ads do like a whirlwind. The boss does a whirlwind. It's just a big, heavy cleave damage fight for the boss's perspective. And technically for your perspective, because some guilds do cleave down the ads and stuff like that. What's technically supposed to happen is you're going to try and like, walk in as a rogue, and then you double like Sinister, then you, use your Thistle Tea and get a couple more Sinister Strikes. Then you have like at least a 4-point kidney to drop, and you basically keep these guys stunned, right? Or you can open with Cheap Shot actually. Depending on the scenario and how things are pulled, and then go into a kidney on each mob. It kind of depends on if you have the rogues for that. There's also like other classes that can kind of stun and stuff like that. So you're basically just trying to lock these ads down so that they don't do their crazy whirlwind type of thing and do a bunch of damage. But inevitably, especially in sort of like a pug run or in a lesser experience run, these guys are going to get loose and they're going to start doing a bunch of damage. Also, threat can be a problem on these guys because you have a bunch of things kind of happening at once. Like people are just cleaving. Like a lot of people are just going to charge in and zug, right? So people might get threat on an ad. Obviously, the moment somebody gets threat on something they don't expect, they start running. It creates a whole situation, right? So expect this fight to be chaotic. And basically, how I deal with this as a priest is you start by pre-shielding, okay? So you don't necessarily want to pre-shield tanks if they don't have rage. They may or may not have rage depending on how quickly you guys are moving through the instance, right? But if they don't have rage, you probably don't want to pre-shield the actual people who are trying to pick up the ads or the boss. But everybody else is like fair game, like all the melee basically. The melee are the people that you're going to prioritize with shields because those are going to be the people that are going to have to walk in and take the brunt of this damage, right? So I pre-shield as many of those people as I can. I will pre-shield the tanks if they already have rage, so they already have a chance to get aggro on the boss, but otherwise not. And then we basically are just watching the ads and the boss and what they do, right? Because your positioning on this fight is going to be heavily dependent on where the ads are kind of being tanked, and it's most likely going to be a complete disaster. If I'm just going to be honest, to prep you for like a pug run or a run with like lesser organized team. So you really have to kind of be looking and be like, okay, like maybe this ad is going in this direction, right? So this ad's coming to here, this ad's like coming to here, okay? This ad's coming to here, so maybe I'm going to stand here, right? But then you have to be careful because the position changes, you know what I mean? This guy might get aggro on something else. Caster might even get aggro, so he might now come here, okay? This guy might come here. You have to be able to willing to kind of walk away and reposition yourself because you really cannot survive hits from the whirlwinds on these guys. Like, you want to have inner fire up, obviously, which helps, but you are really not surviving many hits from these. And honestly, they destroy warriors as well, but a warrior is going to be still in mostly plate. They're going to have like probably close to 9k health or more, right? At least 8 point something k. You're not going to have that, right? You have no evasion. You have no shield. Like a paladin has a shield or something like that, right? They can toss on for this fight to make them a bit more tanky. They have bubble. You don't have really anything like that. So if you get caught in one of these whirlwinds for too long, yeah, you have your power word shield, but after that, you are pretty up a creek. So you really need to pay attention to like what's going on positioning-wise. Also, this means that Prayer of Healing is not typically super great for this fight. Like, theoretically, it could be good, depending on what group you're in. More so if you're Alliance, I would say, in particular, because you're probably going to be in a melee group, right? But on Horde, you're not really in a melee group. The casters aren't really getting hit, so it's harder to use to begin with. And then even when they are getting hit, if they're getting, like, if they're sitting in the whirlwind, they will actually die before the Prayer of Healing goes off, most likely. And also, with how chaotic this fight gets and how spread out everybody gets, again, it can be very difficult to actually hit a bunch of people, especially casters who are kind of more apt to do their own thing with Prayer of Healing, right? At least with the melee, they tend to be centralized around the mobs because they have to hit them, right? So there's that. Now the boss does like this Giga Whirlwind where I think it's basically like a threat drop, and it basically just kind of goes wherever it wants. So this is something you really have to be cognizant of because the boss does a ton of damage, and you really just want to stay away from the boss as much as possible at all times. If the boss is over here, you want to be here. If the boss is over here, you want to be here. I'll actually we'll mark this as like the boss, right? So if the boss is here, you want to be here. I'll just put an X. If the boss is here, you want to be here. You want to like be away from the boss because you need a lot of time if the boss starts coming at you to kind of like move into another direction. Like the worst thing you could be is like not on like here's a bad scenario, right? So the boss is here and you're here and you're thinking like, well, I'm not in the whirlwind range. Okay. I'm not in the whirlwind range, so it's fine. And then the boss just starts moving towards you and it's like a hurricane and you are in the eye of the hurricane and you're just getting clapped. Okay. And the boss moves pretty fast and you're not really going to be able to get out of the path, right? Unless, like, obviously, I think it's kind of random, or it just, like, starts to target somebody, move towards them, and then switch targets. So, obviously, you can get lucky, right? But if, you're in the full path of the boss moving through you, it definitely has a high chance to kill you. So, especially if you ever panic and try moving with the boss, that's, like, the worst thing you can possibly do. If the boss is coming this way, and it's not targeted onto you, you want to try and move through it or something like that. So yeah, this fight is a mess. Just get tons of pre-shields out. Something that I do like to do as well is I'll do pre-shields during the fight even, because there'll be some times where not much is going on. So the ads will be stunned or they're not whirlwinding. The boss is not whirlwinding. What'll tend to happen is you kind of go in, a bunch of damage goes out from all the cleaves and whirlwinds, okay? Then the ads are kind of stunned, or they stop whirlwinding, the boss stops whirlwinding, you may kill the ads, any combination of these things happens, and the damage kind of levels off, right? And, you have some time to catch up, get the raid kind of like to full health, and then the cycle kind of starts again. If there's any ads left, they start whirlwinding, the boss is going to whirlwind regardless. So basically what you want to do is, get those pre-shields out, start spamming on the important targets, the targets that are getting blown up by the cleaves, the whirlwind. Then once things stabilize, you actually kind of want to start getting pre-shields out again on the melee for when the boss inevitably goes back into whirlwind. Now, this is a fight where you absolutely can go It's not necessarily the longest fight, but you're going to be dumping a lot of high-cost spells. So my advice to you is just like full consume. This is a fight where like dark runes actually go a long way on a fight like this. Dark runes and mana potions. You're probably still only going to get one, I would argue, on this fight. But, don't be afraid to pop stuff aggressively. Sometimes you'll have a situation where if a lot of your raid dies, the fight will become prolonged. So that's another reason why you want to aggressively mana pot early, because you can actually get a decent second mana pot, second dark rune sometimes in these fights, if they go long enough, because you just don't have the damage or something like that. So yeah, that's Sartura. It's a cluster. Like I said, I'm gonna make another video when I have a cleaner run where we kind of go through all these things and you can visually see what's going on. But this will have to do for now, right? The heck? Okay, I was gonna say. Now, Fankriss is the next boss. This boss is like super easy. It's basically just like it's another circular sort of room. The boss is in the center. Okay, I'll just actually mark him with an X. And you just basically walk into the center and you fight him. The main dangers in this fight is there's going to be ads that are going to spawn. and you need tanks to basically pull these off. I almost died last night on Fankriss because nobody was picking up the ads, and we had a couple casters die because we play Horde. We don't have Bop or anything like that. And even though they got shielded, like, they just got completely destroyed. So you need somebody to pick up the ads. They're most likely going to go on to healers first because obviously that's what's generating the threat, and they come in from the sides, I believe. Then there's also kind of like bigger worm type ads. Those things do a lot of damage if they actually connect with a target. I believe they target somebody and walk to them. You're trying to kill them before that happens. Usually that's not too difficult. You can also CC them and stuff like that. So if you're a paladin on Alliance side, you can use something like Hodge. I'm not sure if Blind works, but, other CCs work. I don't think Fear works. I'm not entirely sure, though. But, the idea is you just want to kill them or CC them before they come into the raid. This boss is just super easy. It's basically Giga Tank and Spank. The main people who have chances of dying on this are the people that are targeted by the ads, like the normal ads, and the people that are targeted by the worms. Now, I don't think the worms technically do a straight one-shot. So what you can kind of do is if you target the worms, you can target and toss a shield on the potential target. So that way, if the worm does actually get to the player, it doesn't actually one-shot them, right? And in worst case scenario, even if it does one-shot them, you got a nice fat chunk of healing off of their death, essentially, right? So, yeah, that's basically how you play this fight. And this should be one of the easier ones. You don't really have to worry too much about this. You basically just stack on the boss's tail. The reason why you want to stack, by the way, is because of the ads. Theoretically, this should make it easy for warriors to pick them up, but obviously, warriors, especially on a fight like this, they're just salivating because they're like, oh, I get to AFK on the boss's behinds. Like, and, it's not like you guys get to AFK on every fight. It's definitely not how Classic is. Definitely a super mechanically intense game where you definitely can't AFK on like 90% of the fights in the game, but like, God forbid you give the warriors like one fight where they can basically legitimately AFK, and they actually do, and they just don't even care about picking up ads on anybody. So be aware of that. Be ready to fade. Be ready to shield yourself. Like the moment you get aggro, I would actually fade. And yeah, just it can be rough as a healer, but it should be an easy fight overall. Okay, so we're gonna talk about Visk. The next fight. So Visk is like the slime boss, and again, another circle room. There's a lot of circles in AQ. Okay. So circle. Okay. Now, that's a nice, terrible circle. Holy, like if I did the circle drawing website on this would be like a 60%. That was like a polio circle. I should get checked. Okay. So Visk is in the center of the room, okay? And you basically enter from here. Now you want to be, this is a minor point, but I've seen this happen before. You want to be fully in the room because the boss aggro radius isn't super huge. So you can be like in the room before you start the boss. Because I've seen people stand outside here on like the little stalk that leads into the room. And then like when people are running into the room, somehow people will fall off the little path here, and then they're not a part of the fight, and they're dead. I don't actually think they die, but they basically take forever for them to get back into the fight. I don't think the room closes, but just annoying, right? So just get into the room, and all the melee are going to go in, and they are going to have their cold weapons on with the cold oil, and they're basically going to do a bunch of damage to the boss. Well, not actually. They're building up stacks in the boss to try and get the boss to freeze. Okay? So the boss will freeze, and then it becomes vulnerable, and it shatters, basically, into a bunch of little versions of itself, and they all converge. So you get the boss in the middle. We're DPSing it until it freezes. It freezes, explodes, and then when it explodes, it's got, like, a bunch of little dudes like this, right? You think of it like this. Like a bunch of little slimes. And they all converge to the center where they reform into the boss. And how successful you're going to be at like doing damage to this boss is basically going to be how many of these you can kill before they get back to the center and reform. Because the idea is when they get back to the center, they reform into each other. Now, I don't know if it's RNG if it always goes to the same position. It tends to not be like the dead center. I think it's more like over here. You'll be able to see though, because you'll see all the slimes as this is basically happening, and you basically just want to be positioning yourself kind of in the middle of them, right? And this is where the whole sapper things come in. If you've ever heard people talk about engineering for AQ40, this is the big boss for like why you want to have engineering, because what you want to be doing is you want to be following the trend here of where all these things are converging to, and then once they all get like here, let's say all the little ads are about to converge back in, you jump to give yourself more leeway, sapper, and you can even like Holy Nova if you want, basically anything like that, right? Just anything to add a bunch of damage. And range classes are going to be kind of doing damage to, you know, random ones on the outside, basically, as they're coming in. You can also kind of do damage to some of the blobs that are coming in, and melee will start doing damage to them as they start converging closer, right? And then they'll just run to the center of everything in sapper. So you're basically trying to hit the most amount of ads as possible with as many sappers as possible. And you can basically do it where you one-shot the boss, where you kill him instantly. In a lot of cases, the sappers, it's either like your whole raid isn't going to have a sapper, or you know, people sappered in the wrong spot, didn't hit everything, and you're probably going to have to do 2 rounds of this, but it's fine. It's not really a big deal. 2 rounds should be more than doable, and that's basically how you kill the boss. Now, in terms of how you're healing the boss, it kind of depends on your faction. So on Alliance, your priests are going to be spread out in a bunch of groups, and you're just going to be spamming Prayer of Healing, because you don't really have the poison cleanse to actually cleanse the poison volley that Vis shoots out on everybody, unless everybody is running an anti-venom or whatever the consume is that basically removes the poison. Okay, because you're not going to have enough druids to abolish poison the whole raid. Although if you're a druid, that is something you could kind of do. You can try and get as many of those out as possible, but you're not going to be able to hit everybody, because it's only going to be like 1 or 2 of you. Now, if you're on Horde, Shamans have this thing where, so what Poison Volley does is it goes out and it does the initial tick of damage, okay? I'm not sure if it does the same damage as the actual poison tick, or if they're different values. I think it's a little bit less, but basically the lion's share of the damage comes from the repeated poison ticking over time. So as a shaman, the moment the volley goes out, you can like immediately drop your poison cleanse totem, and you basically make it so that you take no damage. I actually think how it works is that the poison kind of goes on for like 1 second and then ticks again. So you can basically make it so that only the contact poison damage hits, which tends to be very little from what I remember. So if you time your poison cleanse totem right, like right as the volley goes out, you can pretty much prevent like a ton of the damage, and it trivializes the fight. So if you have like 6 shamans, it's going to be basically not possible to lose on this fight. And if you have 8 shamans, you could literally basically take no damage. Now, a lot of times what's going to happen is, you know, you're going to have 6 shamans in the melee groups doing this, and then you're going to have 2 groups without shamans. So the druid can either try and cover those groups with abolish poison, right? Or, you know, you can do a combination of that, or the priest doing Prayer of Healing in those groups, right? So Prayer of Healing should easily be able to take those groups back up, and then you're just worried about the tanks. So the boss does kind of hit a bit hard. You need to make sure that you are healing him, but the shamans can mostly handle that in a lot of cases anyway, because, again, if they dropped their totems at the right time, their melee group should not be getting hit at all, and the caster groups should just be, well, I mean, they're getting hit, but they're not getting significantly damaged, and then the caster groups can just be healed with Prayer of Healing. And then you can kind of clean up the, you know, any damage that did go out in the melee groups, kind of in between volleys with something like Chain Heal or something like that, right? So, again, it's very dependent on what faction you're playing, and pre-shielding, also good on this fight, you know. What I will say is, like, once the poison volley kind of gets in full swing, you end up doing a lot more healing than pre-shielding. Sometimes you can get caught in kind of like a chain where you're just spam casting Prayer of Healing, especially if you don't have a shaman to like full cleanse your group or something like that, so they're actually taking a lot of damage. But this fight should be relatively short, And even though a lot of damage goes out, it kind of goes out in bursts, and then the whole section where the adds are converging, there's basically no damage going out unless there's already poison on the raid. So that's something to keep in mind. Then you have a little bit of a regen period. So this fight isn't too bad, usually mana intensive, unless the actual execution of the killing of the blobs gets butchered. And in that case, it'll extend the duration of the fight. So if you have to do like 3 rounds of this, then it can be a bit excessive. But if you're only doing 2 rounds to kill the boss, it is usually very easy. Other thing to keep in mind is that, when the boss breaks and is kind of coming back to the center, right? You're going to be really tempted to do a lot of catch-up healing on the people that, because now they're not taking damage anymore, right? But they might still be damaged from poison volleys or poisons that are still ticking on them or something like that. Now, obviously, you need to save people that are about to die, but you have to be a little bit careful in terms of just like kind of going balls to the walls, spamming all your mana, healing these people back up, because during this time, threat is actually being built on I think it's the individual adds, and when they combine back together, that threat transfers over to the boss, right? So the problem is that even though you're doing massive AoE damage to the little adds, right, which should translate to damage on the boss, that AoE is concentrated on like all the individual little adds, okay? And when you're healing, especially if you're the one like doing a majority of the healing in the transition phase where the adds are coming back in, the boss will absolutely get aggro on you and will just like smack you when he comes back to full health. Now, you can kind of prevent this on Priest with Fade. If you're a Paladin, you can bubble. If you're a Shaman, you're kind of screwed. You just have to hope that he doesn't target you. So be a bit cognizant and don't go like full crazy. Just get as much healing threat as I can during this period, because it can absolutely come back to bite you, and you can just like lose your world buffs. Like, you're unlikely to wipe the group, but you could easily like lose your world buffs, especially if you're not doing this boss like later in the instance. Then that's not going to be fun for you. So definitely something to keep in mind there. And it's basically just pre-shields into prayer healing, into healing the tank and people when it's possible. When this boss does die, he does like a poison cloud, so don't get hit by that. And so this is Visc. Now I said we're not gonna go too deep into the trash here, but I did want to cover the like Anubisath guys really quick, because we might as well be able to just talk about those. Like it's not that complicated. So you're gonna have these Anubisath warriors, right? They're like the big, tall Anubis looking guys. And they basically have, I think, 4 abilities. They have Plague, right, which so if you have Plague, you're the guy with the X on you, okay? And you do damage in like an aura around you. And then you have a Shadow Bolt Volley, which basically does damage to people that are away from the boss. So like if you think of the boss as being X, okay, and if everybody is clumped up in the green, everything's all good. If you're in the blue here, you're getting hit by the Shadow Bolt Volley from the boss, and it's bad. So you want to go into melee at that point, okay? They have Meteor, which basically calls down a meteor on the group, and it splits the damage amongst people, okay? It's kind of like the AQ40 variant, so that's pretty easy to understand. And there's a Thunderclap, and the Thunderclap basically is like a radial damage for the melee. And dealing with these adds is basically deciding how to handle the combinations that occur together, okay? So we're not going to go through every combination, because you don't really need to, but there's a couple of main things. Now, I'm pretty sure you never get Thunderclap and the Shadow Bolt Volley at the same time, because what that would mean is that you would have to not be in melee, but you also couldn't be in range. Now, maybe there's a little bit of a sweet spot, where if this does happen, you stand at the very edge of melee range, and you don't get Shadow Bolt Volleyed, while also not getting Thunderclapped. But I don't think those abilities really go off together. So it's mostly the other abilities kind of happening together. So basically what's going to happen is, if there's a Shadow Bolt Volley, okay, as long as there's no Thunderclap, you're basically all stacking on the ad. Okay, so the ad is here. Where is it? So the ad's here, right? And you're basically all stacking on the ad if there is a Shadow Bolt Volley. Same thing with a Meteor, okay? You're all stacking on the ad. Now, the people that get Plague, if Plague is one of the two things they're doing, they run out of this group, okay? So if you have Plague, you're kind of running out. Now, it's good practice to not run to Narnia, okay? So you don't want to run to here. You don't want to run to here. First of all, if you run deeper in, you might pull more stuff, so that's not good. But you don't want to run too far in front. You don't want to run too far behind. You want to be kind of, you know, out of the main group, but not like super far away, because the range on the Plague is not that huge. It's like stuff like this, right? So you're not like killing the main group by just stepping out to the side. Like once you see people stop taking damage, you're basically good to just stand there, right? And the reason for this is because you can sometimes get a Shadow Bolt Volley and a Plague. Okay, so we'll kind of redo this. Oops. And if you get a Shadow Bolt Volley and a Plague, what happens is that oftentimes you'll have these people that get Plague and they'll run to Narnia. Okay, they're like, oh, I gotta get out of the group. So the group is stacking for Shadow Bolt Volley. People getting Plague and they're running super far away, right? And the boss is just beaming them with Shadow Bolt Volley, which does a lot of damage, and they have Plague, which also does a lot of damage, so they're just dying like instantly. So if you stand too far away, while both these mechanics are active and you have Plague, you're just going to get completely rocked by the volley. So in the Plague combination, so you don't want to do that. So you pretty much want to stand still as close as possible as you can to the group without hitting. That way the Shadow Bolt Volley is not hitting you. Okay? I don't know what the minimum range, I think it's like 20 yards or something you have to be in for the Shadow Bolt Volley. I think if you're beyond 20 yards, it starts doing damage. It might be a little bit further than that, but just something to keep in mind. This is the main combination that kills people, I would say. You don't really have to worry about the Meteor, because typically how you're going to do these, right, is you have the... Let me break this down a little bit more here. So you have two groups, okay? So you have the group, this group, and then you have this group. And you're going to pull the boss like this. This is going to be your range group. This is going to be your melee group, okay? The boss is going to get pulled into melee. Now, sometimes they'll pull with like a hunter pet or just a hunter. And depending on what ability gets cast, you can see what the boss is. Remember, they can only have two things, right? So you can maybe see a Shadow Bolt going out, okay? You know it's a Shadow Bolter. Or, you know, it puts Plague on somebody kind of early, and you can see it's Plague. But basically, you want these two groups, because if there's ever a Meteor, you can't have people spread out, okay? And you don't need everybody to be grouped for Meteor. You just need, like, at least basically half the raid. So that's why you want the ranged and the healers in one spot here, and then the melee over here. Basically, either of these groups can survive Meteor at this point. So you don't have to worry about ever dying to Meteor, as long as you're like this. And then, if it's a Shadow Bolt Volley and there's no Thunderclap, the range group comes into the melee group, okay? And then, if there's a Thunderclap, then the range makes sure to stay at range, or if they did kind of come closer to the melee, they just retreat a little bit back to their group over here. Alright? So, that's basically how that works. You just want to stay in two groups, and then you converge to one group if it's the Shadow Bolt Volley or the Meteor. And then if there is Thunderclap, then obviously you stay in the range group. And even if you get Thunderclap and Meteor, and the Meteor's targeting the range group, you'll still be okay, because you have enough people in both groups to live it. So that's basically how that works. Very simple mechanic. Basically, just if there's Thunderclap, you stay out. If there's Shadow Bolt Volley, you come in. And then remember, if you get the Plague, you are staying out of the group. Oops. But not super far out, because you don't want to get hit by the Shadow Bolt Volley. That's basically how that works. And that's most of the trash. There's going to be one other relevant kind of like trash mob thing where there's these little wasps, okay? And these wasps, they put something called itch on a player, and then itch turns into a poison, and if the wasp then attacks that poison again, like they do a little charge thing, then that player is like instantly dies. I'm not sure if it's instant or if they just take a bunch of damage. So normally what I'll do is I'll kind of like, if nothing else is going on, I'll shield the player with itch when it's about to turn into the poison, because you can see it like count down, and you know, hopefully maybe take the edge off if that person does get hit with the charge immediately after the itch turns. What really needs to happen though is any class that can poison cleanse, which is not priest, needs to like instantly poison dispel as soon as the itch turns into the actual poison. So that's how you deal with the wasp packs. And there's a similar mechanic in AQ20. You'll notice that we've kind of gotten to the point where the AQ20 becomes a learning ground for the mechanics in AQ40, if you've ever done the AQ20 fights or anything like that. And yeah, so after that, it's Huhuran is basically the next boss that we'll talk about. And Huhuran, just a super easy fight. So, another circle. Now, whether or not you dispel or not on this boss is very, like, situationally dependent. You just basically listen to your raid on that, right? I can't really tell you how they're going to want to do it, but there's a poison cleanse, and I think there's a sleep as well, so only as a priest you don't have to worry about this at all because you can't impact any of this. But they'll give a call to either dispel or not to dispel, and you just listen to that as another class. But as a priest, basically what you're doing is you're spreading out around the boss here, right? The boss in the center, or kind of like maybe towards the back, and you're trying to spread out because the boss does like a poison bolt onto somebody that does like a radial thing. So if I'm standing like here, okay, and then the boss hits me with a poison bolt, there'll be like a radial area around that gets affected, okay? And this is where most of the AOD damage is going to come out in the fight, before 30%. Otherwise, it's basically like a tank and spank. You're basically tanking the boss, and then at 30%, the boss enrages and starts doing a poison volley that hits like the 20-some most closest people. So it's, if you're in a raid with a lot of melee, it's basically going to be all melee. If you're like a paladin or something like that, you can walk in and bubble, especially if you don't have a lot of melee in the raid already, to be like one of the targets that's absorbing the hits and you're immune to it as it's happening. If you have stone form, you are immune to the poison, so you can kind of like pop it and walk in and tank some poison volleys for your fellow friends. So all that stuff is good. But basically, what you're going to do as a priest is you're going to pre-shield people. You go into the fight, healing the tank. Then you're healing, people who get hit by the poison bolt and the people that they spread it to. And then around like 45%, you really want to, because this boss doesn't have much HP, it's kind of like just a race boss. So around like 45-50%, you want to be starting to look into starting to pre-shield people. Now, this is a fight where nature protection potions definitely carry. So if you have a very weak raid, it doesn't do a lot of damage, nature protection potions carry super hard here. So you can have one pop before you go into the fight, and then you pop another one once yours wears off for whatever reason, right? And then you have even more nature protection. And this is a reason why you kind of want your raid spread out, because if you're already struggling to kill this boss, what you don't want is you don't want these radial poison bolts hitting a bunch of people and absorbing their GMPPs beforehand. You want people to be spread out so that as few people as possible take damage from the poison bolt thing. That way, going into the last phase, as many people have their original GPP up, right, to give you kind of a head start. Because if you have your original greater nature protection potion up, then it's taking more of the edge off, and then immediately once yours fades, you can just pop the next one. Okay, so that's basically the way to kind of consume cheese this fight. And as a priest, like I said, you're just going to be pre-shielding, healing. Then around like 45 to 50%, you're trying to get a bunch of pre-shields out because you know you're going to hit that in 30% rage phase, and that's where people are going to start taking massive damage. So you basically just excuse me. Yeah, you basically just get a bunch of pre-shields out, and then once the actual volley starts going off, you switch to like flash healing, and you're just bombing flash heals on whoever needs it, basically. And you just try and save as many people as you can. You really have to watch the tank in the last section because he's taking damage from the boss as well as the volley. So it can actually be a lot of damage. And it can really catch you off guard if you're not used to that type of damage. So definitely be watching the tanks, be watching your other warriors, be ready to use shields to kind of clutch save people, and just bomb as much heals as you can. This is a fantastic spot to use something like, any of your active trinkets, basically, right? This is a spot where you really want to be sending those. The last 30% should go by very quickly. A lot of people will wreck this boss, too, if it's like a problem for them. So that makes it go by even quicker. So, yeah, just something to think about there. And it shouldn't really be that hard of a boss. If your guild's really bad, you may want to wear more nature protection on your melee and really heavily invest into consumes, and you should be able to kill it. But that's basically how this fight goes. Now, Twin Emperors. Okay, so this fight is it's kind of a lot of ways. It's probably like the most technical fight in here. There's a lot of ways you can do this. This room is a square, so unlike the circle rooms, right? And make the square here, and then look at that. That's a nice rectangle. We'll have there's like a platform, basically, right? And each M starts on a platform, and then there's like some kind of stairs here. I don't know how to really draw it, but it's like this. It's like a ramp, kind of. And there's like, it's like a little banister thing here. And, yeah, this is basically the fight. I'll mark the... Actually, I should do different colors. So this will be like the melee. I think the melee one starts on this side, and the caster one starts on this side. So this is the fight with the Warlock tank, where the Warlock is basically going to try and be building threat on the caster ad here, and the melee tank builds threat on the melee ad. And after like 30 seconds or something like that, or maybe it's a minute, I'm not entirely, I think it's 30 seconds, the bosses swap places. So the idea is you have a Warlock on each side, okay? This is your Warlock. Okay. And then you have a warrior on each side who's a tank. And you start the fight with this Warlock tanking, okay? And then the bosses switch places. So then the melee tank picks up the melee boss that swapped to this side, right? Because remember, this guy went here, right? So this tank picks up the boss, and then the Warlock that's on this side picks up the tank, or picks up the mob that went to that side. So it's a really simple fight in principle. And the main thing with this fight is healing the Warlock, in my opinion. The tanks tend to be easy to heal, especially if you're kind of in a more boomer guild doing kind of like boomer strats. The tank is probably going to be wearing a shield. They're going to have stone skill potions on for more armor. So it's not like the tank dying is usually not a big concern. The boss does an unbalancing strike, and I'm saying this, but ironically, it did actually one-shot one of our tanks. The unbalancing strike itself doesn't always one-shot, but they can do like a melee swing, literally like point some seconds after, so it's basically like a double hit. And if you get like a really bad melee swing, like a crush, and then the unbalancing strike high rolled or crushed or something like that, it can just like one-shot your tank. So this is like one of those fights where, being Fury Prot, it is like inherently a risk that if you get like a really bad RNG and you're not wearing like the tip-top mitigation gear, using all the mitigation stuff, it's definitely likely you could die. But for the most part, the damage is very healable outside of the unbalancing strike window. I view unbalancing strike kind of like the Broodlord thing. So like on a priest, like the moment it goes off, I just instantly shield usually to, give a buffer for some follow-up damage. Hopefully other heals are already coming in, and that's basically how you kind of deal with that mechanic. Otherwise, you tend to want... This is a bit of a longer fight, so unlike the other fights where you can kind of just like spam flash, if you're in a guild that doesn't have good damage, you really have to be cognizant of your mana, even with runes and dark runes and innervates and stuff like that. So you're going to want to be like cancel casting either greater heals or normal heals in this fight on your warrior tank. And then on your warlock tank, it kind of depends on how geared they are, because a lot of warlock tanks don't go out of their way to get the proper gear for this fight. And if you have a really geared warlock tank with the proper shadow gear, they can still pull a good amount of threat, and they're just like an absolute breeze to heal. It should never be possible for them to die. But if your warlock tank is like going full threat and doesn't really care about shadow resist at all, you do kind of run into a bit of a problem, because they can kind of get bursted pretty easily by this boss. So you may actually need to be spamming flash heal with a bunch of other healers to kind of keep them up, depending on their gear situation, how much health they have, how much shadow resist they have. The health and the shadow resist are both important, right? Because if you get your shadow resist high enough, the fight becomes trivial. So that's number one in terms of healing the warlock tank. But the other part of it is that even if you don't have a lot of shadow resist, you can kind of compensate for that with health, because as long as you have a big enough health pool to survive like 2 back-to-back hits, right, that makes it really easy for the priest to have a solid greater heal window in for you, right? Which means that it's very easy for them to kind of keep popping you back up with these big greater heals after you get chunked out. But if you have like a very small HP pool, right, then now you're kind of forcing them to use more flash heals. Okay, because if the timing is ever not like perfect on the greater heal, and it kind of comes in a little bit late, like you will just get gibbed if you have like a very small amount of HP. So HP is kind of like the second antidote to, if you don't want to get a bunch of shadow resist gear, you just make sure you use all your HP consumes, use a HP flask, and that should basically carry you throughout the fight, because just having the HP is going to give the priest enough of a buffer where they can consistently use their slow heals, their mana-efficient heals, and still keep you up. So, that's something to keep in mind there. Now, while this fight is going on, you're basically just standing on one side. I mean, there are some strategies that have the healers switch sides. I think this is dumb, though. The easiest is just have your healers like stay here on each side, right? And they're just healing the tank. Whatever tank gets threat, and they're healing the other people around them. Technically, I think the best way to do this fight is you play it kind of like closer to the middle, so the healers would stay in the middle, right? And you drag, like these bosses are kind of not they're not like as far away as you see here, because they don't need to be like, I don't think, to both ends of the room. They basically heal if they stack up, I believe. So you don't want them to stack up, but they don't necessarily need to be like the furthest possible away, I don't think. So most likely your raid's going to tank them in a spot where they could be a little bit closer, but that's okay. And what you're basically just doing here is you're just healing, and if the bosses are really spread out, I wouldn't recommend a healer play middle, because most of the significant healing on this fight is healing the tanks. So you don't really need to be a raid healer. Like, if you're a raid healer on this fight, what you should be doing is you should be in one of the 2 side groups, and you should just be always looking at the tank, and then if the tank is fine, then you heal the raid. That's the priority order. But everybody should be looking at the tank. There's basically no reason not to have everybody taking a glance at the tank. There's really no reason to be hanging out in the middle, unless you're doing a strat where the bosses are kind of pulled in a little bit more, and you can hit everybody from the middle. But that is like unlikely. Pretty much nobody does a strat like that. And even then, you would still have to move to hit the tanks, but you could still hit the majority of the raid, right? So, but yeah, most people are just going to break into two stacks and just stay in your stack, heal the tanks, and then heal the raid after that. Now, there's going to be Blizzard that's going to come down. You need to move out of that. It actually does a lot of damage. If you really want to be safe in this fight, Frost Protection potions help, because they just make it so you can eat more ticks of the Blizzard. And then the other thing is Greater Fire Protection Potion actually helps a lot, because there's little bugs that'll be everywhere. Okay, like tiny little bugs Let's make them little red dots here. And the bosses empower them, and they get big. And if they're near you and they get big, they do like a little explode. At least some of them do. I think that the scorpions do. And it does kind of a lot of fire damage. Now, most of the time, how a healer is going to die in this fight is the bug will explode, do like half their health, and then they'll get clipped by a blizzard tick and die, or something like that. Or they'll be clipped by a couple blizzard ticks, can't get out of the, because it slows as well, it can't get out of the radius of the bug exploding, and they die. So you want to be always looking around you to make sure that you're not getting hit by explosions, if that makes sense. So there's that. And then the blizzard, like I said. The other thing you have to worry about is the actual little bugs themselves can sometimes be a problem, because what'll happen is people use AoE abilities like multi-shot, battle shout, or whatever, right? And it'll aggro these little mobs. And then if they don't kill them, okay, then you're healing. You're going to get healing aggro on the mobs. They're going to all clump up on you and do a bunch of damage. Now, this is also another way, very easy way for both tanks to die as well as healers to die, which will cause tanks to die. Because if the healer is getting casting pushback, that's really bad for tank healing, okay? And if the healer is dead because the bugs ganged up on him and you didn't taunt the bugs off, that's also very bad for the raid and the healers. This is a fight where you do kind of need to stretch your mana and play efficiently, so having less healers in the raid with available mana bars is just terrible. So you really need to make sure that you keep the bugs off the healers, and the best way to do this is if you aggro something as a DPS, you just need to kill it or bring it to a spot where it can be killed, but you cannot ignore it, because if you ignore it, it's absolutely going to go to your healer, because the healing aggro is going to pull it off very easily. And then your healer is going to be dealing with it. Somebody's going to have to walk back over to taunt. So just kill it yourself or bring it to a spot where it's going to get cleaved down with other things. And if you do that and your healers are not dying to the normal bugs, then this fight should be free. The actual swapping mechanic is very easy in most cases. Most of the time, the deaths in this fight is healer deaths due to bugs, either getting hit by the explodey bugs in the blizzard, which is kind of just on them, or getting trained by the little bugs, which is not their fault, or letting the warlock tank die, basically, or letting the main tank die. So you want to be on top of the tank healing, on top of your own survival, make sure you don't get hit by the explodey bugs, and make sure you don't get hit by the blizzard ticks. And don't be afraid to fade or anything like that if you're getting bugs on you. You have to be vocal in this fight as a healer. You have to yell at people sometimes. You have to be like, yo, get these bugs off. If they're not getting them off you, because if you end up with like 4 bugs on you, it's gonna be a problem. You're either gonna die or you're gonna be not very effective at doing your job, both of which is bad. So don't be afraid to just call out and tell people to get over. They need to get this stuff off of you. So that's Twin Emperors. Now, Ouro. Okay. So, this fight is just one of the worst design fights in the history of the game. So, Ouro basically starts as like, he's underground. He's got like a bunch of little rubble around him, right? And you're going to be like over here to start. Okay. On the outside, the edge of his room. It's like basically a circular room. It's going to be another really bad circle incoming. Okay, that's a terrible circle, basically, so you're gonna have your melee, like, this is where the boss starts, this is where you start, okay? Everybody's gonna run into the boss, and then the tank is gonna turn the boss around. So the tank is gonna be, let's say, blue here, and he's gonna, let's just say for argument's sake, he's here and he's facing the boss this way, okay? Because the boss does a breath. It's like a dragon's breath that does a lot of damage. So he wants to face this away from the raid. The raid is going to be like here. Okay. Now, ideally, what should happen is the tank really shouldn't be on the direct opposite side of the raid. It should be kind of offset, because I believe the breath is like 180. So if the tank is facing in this direction, this is the direction that's going to get breathed by the boss, okay? So you should be able, as a healer, to be able to stand here. And this makes all the difference, being able to hit the tank that's standing like here or here, instead of standing like directly further back here, because the range is longer to hit this guy, which is going to become a problem in a moment. Okay, so it takes longer range to hit him than it does to hit these tanks over here. Now your melee DPS is going to be right on top of the caster group. They're going to be right on the boss's butt. So it's going to be like the range group a little bit further back, and then the melee group are right on the boss. And then you're going to have mages basically over here is the idea, right? And the idea is they're going to be in their little separate area. And that way, if they pull threat with their ignite, the boss is going to turn in their direction, right? But everybody else will be over here, hopefully. And now the breath is going this direction. So the whole point of the kind of configuration here is that the boss is breathing this way normally, okay? If the mages ever pull threat, he's going to breathe in this direction where your team is not getting hit. This is why if you're a healer or a range that's not a mage, you don't want to cheat too hard in this clump. You don't want to be like too far to the left, okay? Because if you're like over here as a healer and you think you're fine, okay, and the boss turns to the ranged, the mages here, and breathes, you're absolutely dead. If you don't have a greater nature protection potion. This is a fight where greater nature protection actually does help a lot too, because it gives you more leeway. Like one of the main wiping mechanics of this fight is that a melee will pull threat on the boss, because there's lots of like threat drop mechanics, and that will cause the boss to turn around and directly breathe all the healers in ranged and basically kill them if they don't have world buffs, so they don't have protection potions. So the way to win this fight is just slow and steady, manage your threat, right? And just tank and spank the boss and basically zug it down. Now, there's a couple like caveats to this. So the boss hits extremely hard, okay? And there's a lot going on with like the boss's targeting, because he'll do the breath, okay, then he'll do the sweep, and after these animations, he seems to, and if he ever gets aggroed on a range, which the breath is a threat drop mechanic, okay. So part of the problem with this fight is that the range are not necessarily getting like breath, the mages over here. So it's easy for them to rip threat, basically. And whenever the boss is like targeting something that's not immediately in front of them, he kind of seems to do that store attack BS. So the next person he's going to attack, like after a sweep or after a breath, he's going to truck that person most likely. So especially if they're like just a DPS warrior in DPS warrior gear, they're going to get completely destroyed. So a lot of times what you'll see is like you'll run in and you're tanking the boss and everything's kind of going fine. And then all of a sudden, like somebody pulls threat, either because the tank like lost threat from the breath, or like, they just pulled threat for whatever reason. Melee should actually be using the breath to drop threat. In most cases, I think is the easiest way to do this fight. It should be like taking turns, lowering their threat with the breath. But regardless, Ouro's going to pick a new target and just obliterate them. He's going to swap to a new target. He's probably going to hit them like multiple times with a thrash. So the best way to heal this fight is like having Ouro targeted and just spamming your target, because otherwise it's like very difficult to kind of like react to your actual frames in terms of like who the boss is like targeting at any given moment when there's lots of target swaps. Like this can be done cleanly, and there doesn't have to be that many target swaps if everybody pays attention to their threat, their meter. But in a lot of cases, it's going to be a clown show, and it's your job as a healer to try and make it so the clown car stays on the tracks at least a little bit, right? So you want to be having the boss targeted, and you want to be basically cancel casting on that person for when they inevitably get trucked by Ouro. Now, the thing that makes this fight a little bit annoying as a healer is that he does a sweep, and there's a little bit of tension, right? Because you need to be in range to heal the tanks, okay? But the sweep range is also quite big. So let's say the sweep range is like this, okay? So you can see it's kind of like right on the edge of the healers, all right? Which means that if your tank is in a weird position, okay, where you have to be like really deep in to heal him, then you're going to be in range of the sweep when he does the sweep, basically. And it's going to knock you back, okay? And do a bunch of damage to you. So that's not good. And this is another reason why you really don't want to be like on this side angled this way, right? Because if you do get swept, now you're swept over here. Now you're in like perfect lethal spot if he actually does breathe on the mages over here. So you want to be like more towards this side a little bit, right? Like kind of like in the center here. And that way if you do get knocked, you just get knocked kind of straight back and you can just walk back. Now, it's very possible to be able to heal the tank and not get hit by a sweep, but the problem kind of becomes that the aggro is swapping and switching, okay? So like in one moment you might be able to heal the tank and then Warrior X gets aggro and runs it through the boss, right? Which is what they're supposed to do, but they're probably not in the right spot because they don't know what they're doing and they're just a warrior. They just press their 3 keys. That's how they play the game, right? So they're probably not going to actually be in the right spot, and they may actually be out of range of your healing, which is going to cause you to move forward, okay? You're going to creep up to try and heal them, because, like, let's say this diagram is getting pretty messy, but let's say this is now this warrior picked up aggro, right, from the melee group. He walked it through the boss, and now he's, like, standing here, okay? Now, as a healer, you're going to have to move yourself up so your new healing baseline is here, and you can see that we're in the sweep range of the boss, right? So yeah, the warriors, like you tend not to want them to be like the ones who are tanking. You don't want them to be super max range, really, because what's going to happen is it's going to make your healers have to come deeper into the boss, which is going to put them be more exposed to sweep. Now, the problem is like actually communicating this to people and getting them to do it properly is like, that's almost never going to happen. So realistically, what you have to do is you have to take it upon yourself to dodge the sweep. So you have to have the boss targeted, like I mentioned before, and you have to make sure you have like the cast bar, like some form of cast add-on so you can see what's going on. Same thing like when you're watching Ebonrock breathe or Nefarian breathe, right? And then when the boss does sweep, you'll see this cast. Most of the time what you want to do, sometimes you'll know you're already safe, right? Because you've like maybe the tank has actually had threat for a while. That's surprising in this fight, but maybe it happened. And, the last sweep didn't touch you, okay? So you know you're in a good position. You know the tank's in the proper position, so you don't need to move. But if you even think that you might be out of position because, like, somebody else took over threat and you're a little bit too far forward, when the boss is casting sweep, you just step back like a second, right? And then you try and immediately step forward. And that's pretty much about the best you can do if you're going to get hit by sweep, right? Because if it does kind of suck to have to move back and then move forward because he does hit the tank kind of quickly after the sweep. So you want to be able to like really get back in there and start heals on him immediately. But if you get knocked away, it's even worse, right? Because now you have more time to run back. So it's like the lesser evil. Now, the other thing you can kind of do, right, is you can kind of micro position when a new tank takes aggro. So it's kind of like finding your depth on Nefarian, where you'll notice whenever, if you ever watch me do Nefarian, as soon as we go into the actual phase 2, I run up close to make sure I'm in range to just kind of spam heal the tank, make sure he gets stabilized. Then we walk back out, okay? So we walk out until we find the border where we cannot cast on him anymore, where we're out of range. Then we stand there to line the fear. You can do the same thing on this fight. So you basically walk in as deep as possible and just bomb the tank with heals, because he's going to get trucked in the pull. That's another thing. You have to worry about the pull. You want to pre-shield in this fight, absolutely. Don't listen to anybody who says don't pre-shield. Now, the caveat is you want to pre-shield, but pre-shield early, because you want to be able to instantly shield again as soon as the fight starts. So you pre-shield, his weakened soul falls off, then he goes in, then you're following him in, and you're trying to start casting heals on him, but if he gets absolutely destroyed on the first hit, just throw another shield on him immediately. That's how you open this fight, basically. Some warriors leave in last stand on the pull, because it's a very sketchy boss, and it's very difficult if you're a healer and you don't have a mount yet. But basically, so you run in, you make sure your tank's fine, right? Once you make sure he's fine, okay, you start creeping backwards until you're at the furthest you can possibly be for this like green line where you could still hit your tank. And the idea is most cases that's going to be in an area where you're outside of sweep range. But again, the problem is if you're with somebody who doesn't know how to tank the boss, like doesn't know the position, then it's very possible for them to be in a position, because they're so deep over here, where no matter where you stand, you're going to be in sweep range. Okay? So if you trust your tank, just max range him and heal him. But if you don't trust your tank, when you see that sweep cast, pop out. And if it's a random DPS warrior, they're probably not in the right position. I would just kind of pop out. And you can kind of visualize, like, as you do the fight more, you'll get an idea for, like, how far away from Ouro himself you need to be. Because, remember, it's not the tank that's the one that the range matters for the sweep. It's the actual boss. It's just that the position of the tank can make it impossible for you to be able to heal him and not get hit by the sweep, right? So you'll be able to tell eventually if you're in a position where, so you max range your tank, and then you'll be able to tell, like, okay, am I going to get hit by sweep here? And you'll know after you gain some experience on the fight. And you can just adjust based on there, right? So if you know you're going to get hit by a sweep, then you know you have to move out when the actual sweep cast comes and then walk back in. But if you know you're not going to get hit by a sweep, you can just plant there and continue to heal. And this is basically the entire fight. There's not much for you to do on healer. You're just healing the tanks. You're healing other people. This is a fight where it is kind of sometimes sketchy to like peel off and heal other people. So definitely keep an eye out on whoever is tanking, especially if it's not the main tank. Like, if it's the main tank, it's kind of one thing, right? Because he's kind of geared. But if it's like somebody else that has aggro, it's not the main tank, you probably need to bomb them with heals. And you can absolutely kind of get caught trying to heal other people in the raid sometimes. So target a target, heal who Ouro is targeting. When the tank has stable threat, you can kind of catch up on other people. You have to make a judgment call if you're going to get hit by sweep or not. If you think you are, you back out to dodge it. If you don't think you are, you just stay planted and heal. And that is basically the essence of this fight. This is a longer one. It's kind of like one of the more, I don't want to say it's a complicated fight, but the thing is like, people don't understand what's going on at all, which makes it seem complicated. So yeah, that's basically how to heal that fight. Cthulhu. Okay, we're on the last boss, guys. We're almost there, right? I need to drink some water, man. I'm dehydrated. So Cthulhu's room is like this. It's like a square again. I keep saying square. Brain is fried. Rectangles, right? What the? Oh, okay. XD. So the square, right? Now, there's entrances. There's like an entrance to the room here. I think there's only one. Okay. And then there's the boss in the center. Okay. And then there's going to be like little tentacles that spawn around the boss. Make this a big X. Okay. And then there'll be other tentacles that spawn like out here. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. I'll put the circle for the big ones. Okay. So we're gonna start with the pull. Basically what happens is the boss does an I-beam and it chains to other people. Now the chain range is not that big, but there's a lot of people in a raid. And what happens is when you're filtering into the raid, right, it can be very easy for it to just chain to one person, then to just chain to the entire group and kill everybody. You've probably seen the tiny violin video where he runs in and starts the boss and kills everybody. Now, that video is a little bit different because basically what happens is you start outside of the room, okay? So everybody's outside of the room. Now, if you walk in front of the room for any reason, it aggroes the boss. And if you walk in front and you stand like here, it probably doesn't matter because the boss is just going to beam you and you're not next to anybody, right? But if you are next to your raid, so like let's say the raid is like literally everybody is lined up right to the edge, right? Where you're about to peer into the room, then somebody walks out, then the boss is going to beam you, and then it's going to beam everybody else, okay? So the range that the actual thing changed from is not that big, but the reason why you see like everybody die in the tiny violin white video and stuff like that is because when you aggro the boss, and then you like, let's say you aggro the boss and then you walk back into the group, right? You can't LOS once combat has started, so he's just going to beam you anyway as the first target, and then the beam's going to chain to everybody else. Okay, so that's basically how that works and how not to die in the pull. So how you kind of confront this is you send your tank in first, okay? And you send your tank because he's got the most HP, whatever. He can wear a nature pot if he wants, but he doesn't really need to. This is another fight where if you're like really struggling to kill this boss, nature pots do help because they can take the edge off of this beam mechanic. But anyway, you walk in and you have your tank. He's going to absorb the first green beam. You'll see it. It's like a green beam that goes from the boss onto him. Once you see that, then people start filtering in the room. And you're going to have positions, is the idea. Like your raid will break this down for you. Even in a pug, they tend to do this, where it's a spreadsheet, and it's got like, it's kind of like this, right? But instead of the red dots being where the ads are going to spawn, they have circles or whatever, or squares, and they're numbered, and that's where your number is going to correspond to your name, and that's where your position is going to be. Okay, so they're going to be like if you're like number 3, okay, I have a box here that's like 3, okay, and you just go to that position. So you just go to wherever you're assigned on the map, basically, and then you basically stay there for most of the fight. And the reason why you want everybody in a position, right, is because you don't want people chaining the beam to one another. Like, you need to have spots where the beam basically stops chaining. So how it tends to work is melee is the ones that are most vulnerable to the beam. So you stack the melee in like groups of 2 or potentially 3, but I think usually 2 around the boss, so that the beam hits the first melee, it chains to the second melee, but it doesn't, because the beam gains more damage as it chains. So as long as you don't chain it to too many people, the damage is manageable. But if you chain it to like 5 people, the 5th person's getting nuked, or probably even the 4th or whatever. So that's basically what makes the beam dangerous. So the melee are going to be stacked around the boss in like pairs, basically, right, like this. And they're going to be DPSing the boss, and then they're going to be killing the ads when they spawn, okay? And then your casters are going to be like these boxes, and they're going to be offset from each other. Healers and casters, okay? And there's basically 2 types of tentacles. Oh, 3. So there's little mind flay tentacles that appear around the boss. They target somebody and do a very high damage mind flay. These need to be kicked. If you're a shaman, you can like earth shock them. Melee can kick them. It can be counterspell. They just need to be kicked because they do a ton of damage, okay? Very easy to die, the mind flay tentacles. Then there is a bigger tentacle that spawns. It needs to be kind of like tanked. That's what this is. And this guy does like he does like a crush hit on the tank, but it's not really that bad. It's just that he needs to be tanked, and some strats kill this, some strats don't kill them. I'm not entirely sure, but this needs to be tanked, basically. And then there's other little tentacles that spawn that aren't eye stalk tentacles, that are smaller than the big tentacles. They just need to be killed. They just kind of like spawn and they hit stuff around them, basically. And I think the idea is, like, if you're too far away from them, they still hit you or something like that. That's why they have to be damaged down. So you want, like, a warrior going on to them and kind of, like, pseudo-tanking them and killing them. This is the warrior just going on to them so that they don't do the stuff where they hit outside of their range, and then the warrior's DPSing them down with the ranged while you're healing them. So there's basically like those 3 types of tentacles, and you're just DPSing the boss, and as a healer, you're just basically healing whoever needs to be healed. This fight, depending on if you have world buffs or not, if you don't have world buffs, it's probably going to 2-phase, so it can be kind of long. If you have world buffs, you should easily be able to 1-phase unless a ton of people die, so it shouldn't be that long. So adjust your healing accordingly, like in terms of what you're using, based on how the fight is going. So if it's going to be a really easy kill, you can just spam flash heal. If it's going to be a longer fight, you probably want to mix normal heal, greater heal in, right? And if it's a really long fight, you can actually get a lot of good damage, good healing from Renew on this fight. Actually, in the demon run we did last night, we had one pull where we actually wiped on, but we almost killed the boss, and I had so much Renew healing, because basically once you get really deep into the fight and you're kind of getting the actual acute damage that you need to heal is not very much. Like, typically the things that you really need to worry about are the eye stalk tentacles. These do massive mind flay damage, and those are things you might have to shield people, flash heal people for. But otherwise, if somebody's just tanking the big tentacle, or if they just when the tentacles spawn, they knock people, right, and that does damage. So if you're just healing back miscellaneous damage where the person isn't a consistent target, a spell like Renew is like perfect for that. At least when people are When people aren't it's just going to get sniped. But at the end of the fight, when everybody's kind of like and people are just hanging around at 50% health, something like that, casting a Renew on them is kind of fine. Technically, it's always better to instantly heal them, because if somebody is sitting around at 50% and they get unlucky and get targeted again, it's very easy for them to die. But when you don't have much mana, you don't have a choice, right? You can't just be flash healing like everybody, because if everybody's at 50%, you can't flash heal the entire raid on 30% mana, or you just go So you just have to, Renew people and hope that they don't get hit again. So in that sense, Renew actually does a lot of work on some of these longer fights when the situation is really broken down. Any HOTS, really, not just Renew, like Rejuvenation, etc., right? But yeah, that's pretty much the only time it's going to have use in the fight, right? Like, if everything's going well, it's just going to get sniped super hard. But anyway, you basically keep damaging the boss. He's going to do this thing called Dark Glare, where the eye, there's an eye in the center, in case you don't know what Cthulhu looks like. And he's got, like, the eyeball, like the cornea thing, right? Like, you can see, like, if his eye is actually facing you or if it's the back of the eye. Now, the Dark Glare comes out of the front of the eye. So you're just looking at the boss the entire fight. So if the boss is, like, looking at you, let's say you're this number 3 player, right? And the boss is looking at you in your direction. He's going to start Dark Glare, okay? And he just targets somebody and starts it. And it takes a second for him to cast it, and then the beam kind of goes out, and it's like a red light. And even during this red light, you can't die, and then the beam actually starts, okay? So you should never die to this mechanic unless you're, like, literally out to lunch and you're in space and not paying attention, okay? Because the boss can, like, literally look at you, the light can come out, and you're still not dead, you can still move. It's not until, like, the actual beam comes out and then starts rotating where it can actually kill you. Like, there's so much grace period in this actual beam in terms of being able to move out, even if it's directly on top of you, even if you're not paying attention right away. Like, I was so, like, we were kind of, like, so done last night, because it had been, like, 3 hours we were in there. Like, I was barely paying attention. I had the beam spawn directly on top of me twice, and, like, I was, like, not, like, even fully paying attention and easily able to walk out. So you should never die to this beam. Like, if you're dying to this beam, it's a huge awareness problem. You need to fix that. Like, people cannot die to this beam. It's so free, and there's just no reason, right? So it's going to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. It's random. And it basically, I think it goes to, like, the other side. So if it starts here, it goes to here, I want to say. Like this. Maybe it goes all the way around. I'm not even sure. I think, who knows? But it doesn't really matter, because all you have to do is, like, either walk on the inside, right, to fall. Like, if the beam is chasing you actively, like, let's say you're here, right, where the beam starts, so you don't want to chance it. You don't want to run back through it, right, because you think it's going to spawn and it's going to kill you as you're running through. So you just run with the beam, but you stay on the inside, so you have less distance to run. Now, this actually happened to me where I was, again, kind of like out to lunch because it was just a terrible run, and the beam spawns on me, and I picked the wrong direction to run, right? So the beam is following me, but I still don't die because it's just so easy to avoid this mechanic, right? So again, just no matter what, you should never be dying to this mechanic. You can follow the beam, right? Or you can, if you get on the other side of the beam, you can just chill there as the beam is rotating around. Basically, there's kind of two schools of thought, right? Where you can mirror your, like, there's two strategies with how you deal with the reposition after the beam. The first strategy is you go back to your original spot. Now, if you're going to go back to your original spot, right, like, let's say, I'm going to redraw this because this diagram is getting, like, it's getting, like, really crowded. It's going to be hard for you guys to see. Okay, so we're going to start this again here, right? And so the boss in the center. Okay. Boss in the center, and he's doing his beam, okay? Now let's say you are here. Okay. Right? And he does his beam, like, here, okay? So shoots his beam out here, and it's rotating this way. All right. Now, again, we'll just draw this to make the whole room, right? So boss is in the center, he's shooting the beam out this way, it's rotating this way, and you're here. So what you would do in this situation, right, is maybe if you were really heads up and you saw he was about to beam beforehand, you actually walk through before the damage goes out, and you stand here, and then you just wait for the beam to finish rotating, and then you just, like once the beam rotates past your original position, you just walk back there and you're golden, okay? But let's say you're on this side, you're not really paying attention, or you don't care or whatever, and you have to walk with the beam, right? So the beam is going this way, and you're running with the beam, okay? Now, what you want to do is, instead of just being ahead of the beam, you want to keep running, right? You want to outpace the beam and run all the way back to your original position, like that. So you want to do a circle, basically, where you run back to your original position. That's if you're doing the strat where you go back to your original position. Now, there'll be some strats where, let's say the same situation where you start here, right? The beam starts here, it's rotating the same direction, okay? What they'll do is they'll have you be 180 degrees from where you are. Full semicircle, and you end up right here. That's the second strat, and everybody does this. And if everybody does this, if everybody rotates in a semicircle, then you have basically identical positions on a different part of the map. So you keep the spacing. The only thing you're trying to do is keep the spacing. And those are the two main ways you kind of deal with the dark glare mechanic. So really, really easy. And it's just going to depend on what your raid leader wants to do. But yeah, basically, if you're doing the 360 thing, you need to cheat if it's going to be hard to get back to your spot. Because what you can't do is you can't, if you're here again, right, and the laser starts, okay, and you're going 360 degrees back, and you have to run the 360 degrees, you can't wait until the beam, if the beam ends here, right, so the beam starts here, it ends here, oops, yeah, the beam starts here and it ends here, okay, and you can't wait until the beam ends and you're, like, over here now, because you remember you've been running the whole time, so you're in front of the beam. You can't then walk back to your original position, because now the boss's eye is active again, and he can beam you. So you're running through a bunch of the melee. I mean, you can do this, right? But you have to really be careful and meander your way through, right? You have to kind of take the weird path. You have to dodge everybody to get back to here. You can't just, like, walk through the melee, because otherwise you'll end up probably killing a bunch of people if you try and do that. So you have to kind of get back to your position early if you're doing the 360 degree strat. That's basically how Cthulhu works. Okay. Now, phase 2 is when you basically kill the first eye part, and he goes into the ground, he comes back up. Now, he's basically immune to damage in this phase on the outside, and this is actually a much simpler phase of the fight, where, well, just go back to here. So we have the room again, right? And the boss is in the center, okay? But now everybody goes to like this, they call it the south part of the room where you enter, the front part of the room, right? So all the people are like here now. You want to clump up, it just makes it easier for healing. Now you don't want to be right on top of each other, okay? Because tentacles can spawn and they'll knock people, so you don't want your entire 40-man raid on a dot and then get knocked by a tentacle. But you want to loosely spread out in the front of the room here. Like even being around here is kind of fine. But you don't want anybody in the back or anything like that. This is a no-no, okay? No in the back or on the side. You want to be in the front. If we split the boss down the middle, you want to be in the front half of the room, basically at all times. Okay. Now, you're basically just going to heal. The same stuff is happening in this phase as the other phase. A tentacle will spawn here that does the same thing as, like, Cthulhu no longer does the chaining tentacle, but a tentacle will spawn that does the chaining tentacle. Now, I don't think it's as bad as in phase 1, but that's another reason why you want to be loosely phased out or spaced out, and you want to be killing that tentacle with a high priority, okay, when it does spawn. It's like a beam tentacle. I think it's called, I forget what it's called, but it's, you'll know when you see it. Then you have the same other types of tentacles that spawn, so same story. The only thing different in this phase is that these huge tentacles come and grab you, so they pop up under the ground, they knock everybody around you out of the way, and they target one player and they pull him under, and they put you into the stomach of Cthulhu, okay? And the stomach, I'm going to basically, we're not going to have to go back to this diagram because this is all you need to know. It's just stay in the front of the room, loosely spread, and heal people, okay? Now, if you get pulled into the stomach, how the stomach works is there's 2 tentacles. So I'll do the circle. There's like a tentacle on each side, okay? You're going to start here, where you spawn in. You fall into like goo, which does, I think it does damage to you, or it puts a stacking debuff on you. When you're in the stomach, you just take passive damage and you take a stack, which means that you take more and more damage the longer you're in here, okay? And the idea is that there's a escape hatch here, it's like a sphincter, that launches you out of the stomach, okay? So you fall into the stomach here, you're in the goo. This is all the green goo area, right? All this is green goo, and then these are kind of like spots of land, okay? And there's tentacle, and there's actually, sorry. These are the spots of land, and then the tentacles are actually more like, don't discount these tentacles. The tentacles are more like here, off to the side, okay? So when you spawn in, your immediate job is to get to one of the pieces of land, so you're not actively taking the damage from the goo, but you're still taking ticking damage from being inside the stomach, okay? And as a DPS, you're just killing the tentacles, and when you kill both the tentacles, okay, the boss becomes weakened, and you can actually damage him on the outside. So there's usually some type of communication where people will talk about, okay, this tentacle's about to die, push the boss now. And push the boss means kill the last tentacle, so it goes into the phase where he takes damage. You're not going to be able to do this in one run, because you'll take too many stacks as DPS. So what tends to happen is, the DPS come in, they get to like 5 stacks doing damage to the tentacles, they walk to the escape hatch, and they leave. Okay? You don't want to leave at super low HP, ever, because if you leave it really low HP, when you get spit back out, something can just pop up on you and insta-gib you. Okay? So you don't want to really wait until you're like super low. And if you're a healer in here, what you should be doing is you don't really want to stay too long in the stomach as a healer, but you want to get to one of the platforms, you want to heal up whoever is in here, top them off, give them a shield, anything that's going to make them more durable, allow them to last a little bit longer. So I always renew the targets in here. This is actually a good use case for like Renew or HOTS or something like that. And then I put a shield on them. And then once everybody's full health, they're renewed up, they're shielded up, I dip back out. Because most of the time as a healer, your healing services are going to be better put to use on the outside. Because that's where, you know, more unpredictable damage is happening with tentacles spawning on people and eye stalks and everything like that than inside. So you don't want to have, like, at most you want, like, one healer inside. And if there's ever more than one healer, the other healer should instantly leave. And even the healer that's inside shouldn't spend too long in there. You want to top yourself off, top up anybody else that's in there, give them a renew, give them whatever HOTS you have, give them a shield, and then dip out, okay? And it's super easy. You just, like I said, you come here, you walk to here, and you exit the stomach via the sphincter here. It shoots you back outside. You continue to heal as normal. And then once both these tentacles die, then the boss becomes vulnerable, and you just, you basically nuke him down. And if you have world buffs, you can do this in one rotation. If you don't have world buffs, it might take more than one. But it's just rinse and repeat. And the boss never goes back to phase 1. You're always in that phase 2 cycle where you're just on the outside. People get sucked in. You do damage to the tentacles in the stomach. They get pushed out. Keep doing that until the tentacles die. Then the boss becomes active and you kill it. Now, sometimes when the boss becomes active on the outside, you'll want to DPS it as a healer. Typically, this can be done to help one phase the boss, right? Your raid will tell you whether or not to DPS. If there's a lot of people dead, you're usually better off not DPSing as a healer because you want to save your mana for the next kind of repeat of the phase. Because what's going to happen is once the boss goes into that invulnerable state, or that vulnerable state, sorry, for 40 seconds or however long it is, he doesn't do any damage to anybody and doesn't spawn any extra ads. So any ads that are up stay up, but he doesn't spawn anything extra, which means that if you killed all the ads and then you push the boss like you should, and your DPS are just free hitting the boss, as a healer, this is a great time to actually stay out of combat, regenerate your mana, right? So you can wand the boss, but you don't want to be like casting spells on it unless they specifically need your damage to end the boss in that phase. Because otherwise you want to be regenning mana for the next phase you're going to have to do. You don't want to be like dumping mana into Mind Blast and Shadow Word Pain that's probably going to miss on the boss anyway. And then, you know, or whatever, Lightning Bolt if you're a shaman. And then be for the next phase when you actually have to heal, right? So you want to take that vulnerability period to regenerate if things aren't going well, and don't waste your mana trying to do basically no damage to the boss. So that is basically all of AQ40. Kind of a long video, but we made it, right? So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helps you guys. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the description. We might do one of these for all classes, but this one took a long time, and a lot of the strats are very similar. So I think we might end up just doing VOD reviews for the classes instead of doing like another, you know, like thing where we go through the whiteboard in every case. We might just VOD review a specific run through a specific, for a specific class, and we'll kind of break down the actual gameplay in those. But in terms of just like a whiteboard thing, this might be the only one we do. So thank you guys for watching, and like, comment, subscribe if this helped, and talk to you later.